Imagine being trapped in a room. It is freezing cold outside. A blizzard is howling against the walls. You are starving. Your stomach is cramping with pain. But right next to you is a cabinet. Inside that cabinet are 800 cans of food, meat, fruits, vegetables, enough to keep 5 men alive for an entire year. Next to the cabinet is a heater. There's a massive tank of propane outside ready to be used. There are matches, there's wood. But you don't eat, you don't turn on the heat. You sit in the dark, wrapped in a thin blanket, and you wait for months as your body slowly wastes away to nothing. This is the mystery of the Yuba City 5, the American Dyatlov Pass, a case where logic died in the snow and where 5 men chose a slow, agonizing death in a room full of survival. It was February 24th, 1978, Yuba City, California. 5 young men, known to their families as the boys, were excited. They were best friends. They all had mild intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions, but they were independent. They lived with their families, they held jobs, and they were obsessed with basketball. The 5 men were Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Ted Weyer, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Mathias. They were all between the ages of 24 and 32. That night, they drove to Chico, California. They wanted to watch the UC Davis basketball team. They were in Jack Madruga's car, a turquoise 1969 Mercury Montego. They watched the game. They saw their team win. Around 10 p.m., they stopped at a local market. They bought snacks, candy bars, milk, soda. They told the clerk they were heading back. It was a simple 1-hour drive on a straight highway, but the boys never made it back to Yuba City. The next morning, 5 families woke up to empty beds. This was highly unusual. The boys were creatures of habit. They didn't stay out late. They didn't go on spontaneous trips. They took their medications at specific times, especially Gary. Gary was a veteran who struggled with schizophrenia. Without his medication, he would lose touch with reality within days. The families called the police. They started searching the road between Chico and Yuba City, but they found nothing. No car, no skid marks, no evidence of a crash. The men had vanished into the night. Days turned into weeks. The police were baffled. Then a forest ranger found the car, but it wasn't on the road to Yuba City. It was 70 miles away, deep in the Plumas National Forest, high up on a mountain called Rogers Cow Camp. The car was parked at 4,400 feet of elevation. It was surrounded by snow. But here is the first oh shit moment. The car wasn't stuck. The police pushed it out easily. The gas tank was half full. The keys were gone, but the car worked perfectly. The doors weren't locked. One window was rolled down. Inside, the floor was littered with the wrappers of the snacks they bought in Chico. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle, but there were no footprints in the snow. A week of blizzards had erased any trace of where the men went. Why would 5 men leave a warm, working car in the middle of a forest and walk into a blizzard? It made no sense, but it gets weird. While the police were at the car, a witness came forward. His name was Joseph Shans. He told a story that sounded like a fever dream. On the night the men disappeared, Joseph had been driving the same road. His car got stuck in the snow. While he was sitting there, he had a heart attack. He was in terrible pain, drifting in and out of consciousness. He said he saw a set of headlights behind him. He saw a group of men walking past his car. He saw a woman holding a baby. He shouted for help. He said the men stopped. They looked at him, and then they turned off their flashlights and walked away into the dark. Later, he saw the lights of a truck. Again, he shouted. Again, the lights went out and the figures disappeared. The police didn't know if they could trust Joseph. He was in the middle of a medical emergency, but his description of the car behind him matched Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego. The winter in the mountains was brutal. The search parties couldn't go any higher. The snow was too deep. The families were left in a state of living hell. They knew Gary Mathias didn't have his medicine. They knew the others weren't dressed for the cold. They were wearing light jackets and thin shoes. They were dressed for a basketball game, not a survival mission. Spring finally arrived. The snow began to melt, and the mountain began to reveal its secrets. On June 4th, 1978, a group of motorcyclists went to a Forest Service trail. The trailer was located 20 miles away from where the car was found. 20 miles. In a blizzard, In the dark, on foot. When they opened the door of the trailer, the smell hit them first. Inside, lying on a bed, was the body of Ted Wire. The scene in the trailer was a survival horror masterpiece. Ted Wire was wrapped in 8 blankets. His feet were frozen black with gangrene. His beard was thick, but he wasn't the man he used to be. Ted had lost over 100 pounds. The autopsy showed he had survived in that trailer for at least 8 to 13 weeks, 2 to 3 months. He had lived through the entire winter. But here is the psychological paradox. The trailer was a sea can. It was specifically designed for forest rangers to survive. In a storage shed just outside the trailer, there were hundreds of cans of food, sea rations, puddings, fruits. Ted Wire had only opened 1 or 2 cans. He was surrounded by enough food to feed a small army, and he chose to starve. There was a propane tank outside. It was full. There were matches and paper on the table. He could have had heat. He could have had light, but he never turned the valve. He sat in the pitch black, in the freezing cold, and slowly withered away. The searchers looked around the trailer. They found the remains of Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga. They hadn't made it. They had collapsed in the snow and died of hypothermia. Their bodies had been scattered by animals. Then they found Jack Hewitt, or what was left of him. His father found his son's backbone in the brush. His clothing was nearby. That left only one man, Gary Mathias. The 5th man was missing, but they found his shoes. His leather shoes were inside the trailer, sitting next to Ted Wire's bed. Gary's sneakers were gone. This suggested that Gary had been in the trailer with Ted. It suggested that Gary had tried to help him, but then Gary vanished. No trace of his body has ever been found. Think about the horror of those months. The trailer is small. The wind is shaking the metal walls. Ted Wire is lying on the bed, his feet rotting. Gary Mathias is there with him. Gary is losing his mind because he hasn't had his schizophrenia medication. He is seeing things. He is hearing things. Why didn't they eat the food? Some experts think the boys were so afraid of breaking the law that they wouldn't touch things that didn't belong to them. They were good boys. They followed rules. If they thought the food was stolen, they might have stayed away from it, even if it meant dying. Others think Gary Mathias was in a state of total psychosis. Maybe he told the others the food was poisoned. Maybe he didn't let them light the heater because he was afraid of being seen. The dynamic of the group changed from friends to a death cult of logic. But how did they get there? 20 miles in the snow. The police tried to recreate the walk. Professional hikers in winter gear struggled to make it 5 miles. The boys did 20, through snowdrifts that were 6 feet high, in the middle of a mountain range they had never visited. Why did they leave the car? If the car wasn't stuck, why not just sit inside and wait for morning? They had a heater, they had gas. Instead, they walked into the teeth of the storm. There is a theory that they were being followed. Remember the witness, Joseph Shans. He saw a truck. He saw a woman with a baby. Was there someone else on that mountain? Someone who forced them out of the car? Someone who chased them 20 miles into the wilderness? The police checked every truck in the county. They found nothing. There is another detail that is often ignored: the woman and the baby. Joseph Shans swore he saw them in the middle of a blizzard on a road that was blocked by snow. Who brings a baby into a mountain storm at 2 a.m.? Some people think it was a hallucination. But what if it wasn't? What if the boys saw someone they thought needed help? They were kind-hearted men. If they saw a woman and a child in the snow, they would have followed them. They would have tried to save them, even if it led them to their own deaths. No signal, no help, no way out. The families of the Yuba City Five were left with a mystery that has no answer. Jack Madruga's mother never believed it was an accident. There was some force that made them go up there, she said. They wouldn't have done it on their own. But what was that force? Was it a mental breakdown? Was it a predator? Or was it just the cruel, indifferent hand of nature? Gary Mathias is the key to it all, because he is the only one who didn't leave a body. Did he walk out of the trailer after Ted died? Did he try to find the road? Or is he still up there, a skeleton hidden in the thick brush of the Plumas National Forest? Every 20 seconds, the mystery deepens. What they didn't know back then was that Gary Mathias was a highly trained soldier. He knew how to survive in the woods. If he was the leader of the group, why didn't he light the fire? Why didn't he use his military training to open the food can? The answer might lie in his illness. A schizophrenic brain under extreme stress doesn't function like yours or mine. It creates its own reality. In Gary's reality, maybe the trailer wasn't a sanctuary. Maybe it was a prison. Maybe the food wasn't food. And maybe the blizzard was the only thing that felt safe. The Yuba City 5 case is a warning that the mind is just as dangerous as the mountain. You can have everything you need to survive. You can have a roof over your head and a pantry full of food. But if you lose your way mentally, none of it matters. The American Dyatlov Pass remains one of the most haunting cases in true crime history because the survivors weren't victims of an avalanche. They weren't victims of a killer. They were victims of a room full of food. The car was found. The bodies were found. But the truth stayed on the mountain. If you ever find yourself lost in the snow and you see a light in the distance and you find a room full of help, take it. Don't wait. Don't follow the rules. Because the mountain doesn't have any rules for you. It only has the cold. Some places don't let you leave, and some decisions can't be explained. They were never seen again.